everybody, and welcome to this Teaching English event on inclusive assessments. We've got 3 fantastic sessions today, all about how to make assessment more inclusive, more authentic, and more meaningful, which is something as teachers that we all have to deal with. So I'm really looking forward to these sessions today. So if you're joining us in Zoom, then please come in and tell us where you're joining us from in the chat. And welcome also to all of our audience on Facebook and YouTube. And you can also say hello in the comments and let us know where you're joining us from. So we've got a real mixed, as always, a very international crowd here: Ukraine, Singapore, Romania, Italy, Azerbaijan. So welcome to everyone. It's great to have you here. And we're looking forward to these sessions today. Okay, so we're going to start with our first session, which is called How Can Assessment Be Inclusive? And our speaker for this first session is Nashwa Aly Muhammad. I'm going to ask her to put her camera on now. Hi, Nashwa.
So, hi, Beth.
How are you doing?
Great, fine, thank you. And you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. And you're joining us from Egypt, is that right?
Egypt, yes.
Okay, fantastic. So we're going to start shortly with your session, but before we do that, I'd just like to tell the audience a little bit about you and introduce you, okay? So this is Nashwa Aly Muhammad, and she's an English lecturer and assessment specialist who works at the Pharos University in Alexandria in Egypt. She's got decades of expertise in English teaching and in language teaching and education. And her focus is specifically on accessibility and inclusion. And she's also dedicated a lot of her career to designing inclusive assessments and creating learner-centered learning environments. So a fantastic speaker to have here on this for this event. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to you now, Nashwa. For those of you joining us on Zoom, if you have questions for Nashwa, please put them in the Q&A and we'll answer them at the end. You can use the comments on all of our channels to react to whatever Nashwa is saying. So thanks very much, Nashwa. I'm going to hand over to you now and I'll see you back at the end, okay?
Okay, thank you. Hello. Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good day so far. As Kath said, I'm Nashwa from Egypt, and I'll be talking to you today about how can we make our assessments more inclusive. So, our plan for today is we're going to discuss the following. What are the challenges of one-size-fits-all exams? How can assessment be more inclusive? And we're going to talk also about the advantages of inclusivity in assessment. And we're going to end by discussing some ideas on to help you to put inclusivity in assessment or into practice in our classrooms. So we will start with a very small question. Would you please take a look at this picture on the screen and tell me, what do you think will be the result of asking this nice Nemo fish to be assessed based on her ability to climb this tree? What do you think this will result in? Would you please share? Not possible, of course. Yes. We will need some accommodation. Exactly. Impossible, of course. Yes. So, according to this, let's discuss the following questions. Would you please tell me in the chat or in the comments below, what are the potential benefits of this type of assessment? It's a regular assessment, a traditional one, a one-size-fits-all assessment, exactly. So what do you think are the potential benefits of this type of assessment? None. Okay, Safiya said none. To boost its creativity, how can we boost this creativity of the no benefits? Okay. We need to resort to equity, of course. Yes. Test their logical thinking. Very nice, yes. The benefits, Karen said that the benefits would only be for the teachers, but not for the learners. I totally agree with you. Rashid said demotivated learner, exactly. Yes. We need to adjust our teaching or our assessment, exactly. So what do you think are the potential drawbacks of this type of assessment? If you have thought of any, what do you think are the potential drawbacks of this type of assessment? The fish is about to die. Yes, the fish is about to die. Exactly. It's very time consuming, of course, and it will lead to nothing. It doesn't include all the learners. Exactly. Um, it would damage the fish. Difficult for beginners. I totally agree with you. Drawbacks. Someone is asking, Amel is asking, what's the meaning of drawbacks? It means the disadvantages of this type of assessment. Benner said it might be very difficult. Yes. And Amin said it doesn't cater to learners' needs. And this is what we're going to talk about today. I totally agree with you. Abdurrahman says that this will lead to poor relation with our students. This is one of the most important drawbacks of this type of assessment, and we will discuss how. Okay, moving on to the next question. How do you think this type of assessment might impact the student learning? Would you please send me your opinions in the chat? Demotivating, Laura. Yes, Laura. Karen, yes. The student, of course, will be confused and frustrated and demotivated. Rashmi, I totally agree. It's negative, of course. Ines, you want the question again? It's on the screen. How might this type of assessment impact the student learning? Jonathan said it would be very confusing and depressing and stressful. Exactly. So we all agree that this type of assessment is demotivating and it has a huge negative impact on students' learning. So we can move on to the next part of this session by talking about the traditional assessment model and its limitations. The first thing is standardization. Standardized tests in particular can be very narrow in scope. They often focus only on a limited set of skills and knowledge, which can be very limiting to students' opportunities to demonstrate their full understanding. In this type of assessment, it lacks differentiation. It has a very limited assessment and very limited feedback. We only ask the students to do a task, and then if they don't know how to do it, we just tell them, you failed this, or you need to redo this task or redo this test, and we never give them appropriate feedback to help them on how to succeed in this test. The second limitation that we face is the narrow focus. Standardized tests or traditional assessments have a very narrow focus because they often prioritize and overemphasize only one thing, which is memorization. They might not assess higher order thinking skills. They often favor specific learning preferences, and this narrow focus can limit the students' opportunities for growth and for development. And of course, this is because they often focus on specific skills or knowledge and neglect other important aspects of student development, such as their creativity or their critical thinking or their problem-solving skills. The next thing is the high-stakes nature. These type of assessments have a high-stakes nature because it puts pressure on the students to perform well on standardized tests, which can lead, of course, to increased stress and anxiety among the students. Another thing traditional assessments can have is a negative impact on students' overall well-being and motivation. The last thing is the idea of teaching to the test. teaching to the test can undermine the quality of education because schools may prioritize teaching to the test rather than focusing on broader educational goals. For example, this limits the students' opportunities for exploration, and of course, it limits their opportunities for inquiry. Another thing is the biased. These assessments are biased or cognitive biased. Why? Because traditional assessments often rely heavily, of course, on memorization and recall. They only care for memorization and then recalling what students memorized in the test, which may not, of course, accurately reflect the full range of the students' cognitive abilities. Another thing is that students who are strong in critical thinking or problem solving may be disadvantages in traditional assessments that do not assess these type of skills. So, of course, this type of assessments have many limitations that will affect the learning process negatively. Another thing is that traditional assessments can disadvantage some specific type of students. First one are the students with special educational needs. Does any of you have a special educational needs students that you would like to tell us about? What kind of special needs that you have? You can share in this chat box. Dyslexia, yes. What else? Maria has 2 autistic kids and 2 dyslexic kids. Many of you, as you can see, have slow learners and ADHD learners. By the way, ADHD is now, we can notice it in everywhere. I have a kid and he's a little bit diagnosed with ADHD. So I'm very, very, very interested in this type of special needs for students because I have to deal with it every day at home. Hearing impairment, like Muhammad said, of course, I have other students at college that they have this problem too. And we're going to see what are the limitations that they have to face. First thing, these students face format limitations. How can they face this type of limitations? Traditional assessments often favor specific learning styles or specific learning preferences, which can disadvantage some students with special educational needs. Of course, for example, if a student has ADHD and they have to take a test that is a timed test, this would be very hard for them. Another thing is the lack of accommodation. What is the lack of accommodation? Here we talk about assessments that may not provide the necessary accommodations, such as extended time or assistive technology or alternative formats to meet the needs of the students with these learning preferences or these learning disabilities. The last thing is the linguistic bias. What is the linguistic bias? In this point, we're talking about how traditional assessments often require a high level of proficiency in the language of instruction. This can act as a language barrier. For example, students who are starting to develop learning a new language, they can be very disadvantaged by this type of assessments because they even cannot understand what the rubric or what the test wants them to do. So here, the language itself will stand or act as a barrier for these students. And we're going to discuss later how to address this type of problems. Next thing is students with cultural differences. As you can see here, we are meeting now to talk about something that we are all interested in. And from the chat box, you can see that we are gathering from all over the world, from different countries everywhere. So each of us has their own cultural differences. So students with cultural differences always struggle with unfamiliar content sometimes, and sometimes they even face cultural bias. How is this possible? For example, students facing unfamiliar content. Sometimes assessments may contain content that is unfamiliar or irrelevant to students from diverse cultural backgrounds. Another thing is the cultural bias. How can assessments be culturally biased? Sometimes many traditional assessments may contain cultural biases or assumptions, favoring some students from the dominant cultural backgrounds. Another thing is here, students with varied learning preferences. This is something that we all have to face in our classrooms. So, first thing is the limited assessment format. Traditional assessments, they often, as we said, rely on specific formats, which may not accurately assess some students with different learning preferences. Another thing is the lack of creativity that these type of assessments have. These type of assessments or traditional assessments may not allow the time or the chance for the students to be creative or innovative, which can be very challenging for some students who learn best through hands-on activities or through artistic expression or things like this. So to address these challenges, we as educators should consider using alternative types of assessment or different methods that are more inclusive and more equitable for the students. It is essential for us to consider the needs of our students when designing and implementing an exam. So we move to the next part, which is the core of this session. What is inclusivity in assessment? I need you to drop your ideas in the chat box and tell me, what do you think inclusivity in assessment means? Yes. Diversity? Yes. Assessing students based on their different types of learning preferences, exactly, in differentiation. Yes. Assessments that accommodate, who said this? Isiana said that these are types of assessments that accommodate all students and make sure that no one is left behind. Excellent, excellent. To make sure, Rashimi said, to make sure that each and every child gets the proper education and attention. I totally agree with you. Yes, exactly. To focus on the progress of the student. Yes, Lotro, I totally agree. More said to adapt for all students. Okay, very nice ideas. So let's see together. Inclusivity in assessment. What is inclusivity in assessment? This refers to the creation of methods that are specifically designed to accommodate to the diverse needs and the experiences of our students. Exactly. So in this case, this means that it involves, or these assessments involves and ensures that the tests are culturally relevant, sensitive to individual differences and preferences, and to make sure that our assessments are free from bias that may disadvantage certain groups of students. The next thing is the key components of inclusive assessment. We have three things. The first one is we need to make sure that our assessments are culturally relevant. How can we make this? By ensuring that the assessments or the tests are responsive and relevant to the cultural backgrounds and the experiences of all our students in the classroom. The second thing here to take into consideration is to diversify your assessment content. How do you do this? You can use names and contexts and scenarios from different cultures, for example, not only from the dominant cultures. The second thing is to make sure that they are bias-free. How can we do this? By avoiding the use of any language or content that may be offensive or that would make students feel discriminated. We need to check for bias by avoiding the idioms, the references, or the cultural knowledge that only some students would understand. Another thing is to be sensitive to individual differences. How can this be put into consideration? By considering the diverse learning preferences and abilities and the backgrounds of our students. The last thing is the representation. How can we put this into our assessments? By ensuring that the tests reflect the diverse experiences and preferences and perspectives of all the students in our classrooms. You can even invite personal connections. You can ask your students to bring examples from their own culture, from their family, from experiences, and put these into the tasks that they are going to have. When you prioritize accessibility and inclusivity in your assessments, we as teachers can create a more supportive learning environment that empowers our students. They can demonstrate their knowledge, they can show their full potential and to show their skills, regardless of all their backgrounds and their disabilities. The next thing is, what is accessibility in assessments? Does anyone know what is the idea of accessibility in assessments? Not a single student should feel excluded. Okay, yes. Anything else? Reach every student. Ida said to reach every student, to have different devices and apps. Abdelaziz thinks that this means to make the test accessible to all the learners. Yes, we're going to discuss how to make assessments accessible. Natalia says that learners are able to read and understand the assessment itself. Okay. Harshita has an idea, which is to make sure that students feel involved. Yes, of course. Shalma said that complete assessments regardless of their needs. Okay. Ines said to have both hard copies or soft copies. Okay, we will discuss these ideas now. Michelle thinks that the test must meet the student needs. Excellent. And Evalue is pointing out to clear design and language. Okay, so let's see what is accessibility in assessments. Accessibility in assessments refers to the creation of evaluation methods or tests that ensure that all the students, regardless of their abilities or special educational needs, have an equal opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge and their skills. How can we do this? We have two key components of accessible assessments: equity and accommodation. So, what do you think equity and accommodation means? Could you share this with me in the chat box, please? Okay, to consider the differences, of course, to ensure the students can show their abilities. Yes, I totally agree, Jan. Asma said it should be easy to understand for the diverse learners. Okay. Equity is different types of help. This could be another way to put accessibility. How this means, yes. Dialogue and asking for solutions, like what I'm doing now. Thank you, Sylvia. Okay, first thing, equity. What does this mean? It means that we need to make sure, or to ensure, that the assessments are fair and to provide equal opportunities for all the students. As we said, regardless of their background or their abilities, we need to make sure that all of them have an equal opportunity to demonstrate and show their full potential and understanding. Second thing is the accommodation, and this means to provide appropriate accommodations or modifications to assessments that meets the individual needs of each and every student in our classroom, whether they have special educational needs or they have different learning preferences. We need to make sure that to remove all the barriers that may hinder their participation or their performance in the assessment. One thing that we can think of when talking about accessibility is how to make our language more accessible. First thing you can think of, for example, simplifying the instructions itself. You need to use short and direct sentences with sometimes bold keywords, and to provide some examples for the students to follow, to make things more clear for them and easier for them. Another thing is that you can, of course, at any time, you can use visual support. You can add diagrams, you can add some icons, you can use even flashcards with heavy texts to help the students be more comfortable when they are answering an assessment or an exam. You can also use glossaries and word banks. For example, you can provide vocabulary support for multilingual learners, so that this assessment isn't just testing the language proficiency. We need to make sure that they show their full potential and their full understanding of the subject we are testing them in. The next thing is a question we need to think of beyond the traditional test. What is one type of alternative assessment, different types of assessment, that you can think we could use to make sure we fairly evaluate a student's learning? Would you please send me your ideas in the chat box? Excellent, portfolios, yes. quizzes. What type of quizzes we will see? Games, peer assessment, Umayma. Yes, we'll talk about this later. Portfolios, as Ines said, we are going to talk about this. We can use Kahoot, presentations, self-assessment, games, reflective journals. Amazing ideas. Someone said we can use portfolios because they are a huge fan of portfolios. Me too. I love to use them. Projects, presentations. Okay, very nice ideas. Now let's see together how to put inclusivity into practice. First thing, we can use performance-based assessments. To know what is performance-based assessment, we need to discuss what do you think is the meaning of this? These types of assessments require students to apply their skills and knowledge in a real-world context. You can think of the meaning as students demonstrating their learning through real-life tasks or to perform rather than only use papers on the test. In this type of performance-based assessments, you need to make sure that you have clear criteria, you give multiple opportunities, and of course, to make sure that you use accessible features. How can we use it? We have many ways to use it. For example, you can use role plays, you can use presentations, as you said, we can use storytelling. So if you're using a role play, if you're assessing students using a role play, they can act out, for example, ordering food at a restaurant or going shopping or a job interview. Instead of just asking them questions about it, you can ask them to perform a role play, and then you can assess their progress according to what they do. Presentations are a very nice and easy way to assess your students because they just need to give a short talk on a topic that they have already studied. For example, your favorite holiday for lower level students, or the impact of AI in learning for higher levels. As for storytelling, you can just ask them to retell a story or a poem they were learning using their own words. We have many examples. We have many examples here. For example, instead of testing a vocabulary with a written quiz, you can just ask your students to plan and act something. You can give them a minute or two to prepare a conversation, for example, at an airport. You're traveling, and then you need to act this out in front of the class, and you can assess their fluency and their vocabulary use and their interaction. Then this is a way, instead of just putting everything on paper tests. Second thing, we have projects, as you have all given this idea. Another thing, you can ask them to create a podcast. You can ask them to make a staged reading or a skit, for example, to perform in front of everyone, and then you can assess them. This you can use as performance-based assessments. As for the projects, it's very easy. You just need to give them an extended task where they create something meaningful or they work collaboratively. So for example, you can ask them to make a research project on a country, on a famous person, on a global issue that we have currently in happening in the world. You can ask them to work on creative projects, to make a class magazine, to prepare a podcast, to perform a short video, act in a short video and direct it. You can ask them, for example, to work on a problem-solving project. They can work in groups, for example, design a dream school or an eco-friendly city, so that you give them the chance to work together and at the same time to feel more comfortable when they are showing their understanding of the subject matter they are learning. Articles and posters, of course, these are things that you can always use in your classrooms to assess your students. The other thing is portfolios. Most of you said that you use portfolios in your classes, and I love using portfolios. It's very easy. You just need to make sure that you have a collection of the student work compiled over time, and this gives them the chance to show their progress and reflect on what they have learned. How can you use it in your classrooms? Very easy. Just collect samples of their work throughout the semester or throughout the school year. if you're trying to assess their writing skills, you can collect samples of their paragraphs, the essays they have wrote, reflection of what they have learned. You can also include in the portfolio some recordings of their speaking tasks. They can record themselves on their mobile phones and then send it to you and keep it in their portfolio. You can add some self-reflections, which is a very good idea in this case. For example, they give them a paper. It's called What I Learned This Week, or What Activity Was the Hardest for Me. Ask them to fill this form out, give it back to you, and then you can observe how they are making progress, or to find out their points of weaknesses and give them some solutions to work on so that they can get over this problem. Always encourage creativity. You can ask them to design something, to draw a drawing, to have vocabulary maps, to even, you can just ask them to have a meme. For example, you are teaching them a vocabulary item. Students are very interested in using technology and social media, so ask them to create a meme to, for example, give you the meaning of the word you're asking them to. It would be very interesting for them, and you will keep them engaged, and they will love to do it. So it will make them more motivated, more engaged, more interested in the subject matter. The last thing is peer assessment. Peer assessment, it's very, very, very useful for both students who are working together and for you as a teacher. This involves them, of course, to evaluate each other's work based on some clear criteria. You have to provide them with clear criteria, ask them to follow it to assess each other. Of course, this method of peer assessment, it promotes the collaboration and they work together, and it allows them to be exposed to multiple perspectives, which would be very useful for them. They can give constructive feedback for each other's work. They can always use teachers' guidance to do this. For example, provide them with a checklist for the students to give each other feedback. And this, of course, will build their awareness and their collaboration when they work together. How can you use this in your classrooms? This is very easy. You can, for example, having a writing, you want to assess their writing skills. After writing a paragraph, you can give them a checklist, and students swap their papers and use this list to make sure that their colleague or their friend, they used a topic sentence, they used correct linking words, they used correct punctuation, and so on. They give them a checklist to help them know how to assess each other. And then you can collect this back to observe and notice their progress and what they did in their writing assessment. If you're doing a speaking task, for example, you can give them the chance during a presentation. For example, peers take notes on 2 positive things or 2 positive points their colleague have made, and then you ask them to write only 1 suggestion for improvement. This is very easy for them, and it would be very nice for other students to feel more comfortable. They wouldn't be shy to make mistakes, and it's more simple for them to accept their students' suggestions, and it wouldn't make them feel shy when they take their feedback from their colleagues. You can ask them, of course, to work together in group work. They can evaluate each other on how they work together, how they collaborated. And for example, you can put on the checklist a question like, did everyone contribute? Did we all speak English most of the time? Were our use of language correct or no? And so on. Help them with a clear checklist and clear criteria, and then take everything back to make sure that they understood what they should do in this type of assessments. Group learning, of course. Yes, that's true. The mistakes are part of the learning process, and they make sure that they understand this idea. Even us as teachers, we make mistakes. My native language is Arabic, so sometimes when I'm speaking English, I have to make mistakes. This is very fine with everyone. We all have mistakes. Okay. When we think of what we have discussed, why does implementing all of these alternative assessment methods work? Because these practices will create a more equitable and supportive environment, or a supportive learning environment for our students. When our assessments are fair and relevant, students are more likely to be very engaged and interested and motivated. This leads to improved learning outcomes, of course, for the students, and they will be more satisfied. If we removed, or we made sure that we remove all the barriers and we allowed our students to demonstrate their knowledge in various ways, we as teachers can get a more accurate picture of their full potential. And then the next point is the best practices for designing inclusive assessments. How can we do this? It's very easy. We can follow some practices. We can create assessments that are accessible and inclusive, and they are supportive for all the students, regardless of their, of course, abilities and different backgrounds. First of all, the universal design of learning. What is universal design of learning? This includes three main points. The first one is multiple means of representation. In this case, we can provide information in various formats, such as texts or audios or visuals. This will accommodate to different learning styles. The next point is multiple means of expression. Here we mean that we can allow the students to demonstrate their understanding in multiple ways, such as to ask them to provide us with written responses, work on a presentation, or sometimes even work on a group project together. The last thing is multiple means of engagement. In this case, we mean that we can create assessments that are interesting and motivating for all the students. For example, you can use role plays, as we said, we can use games, you can use real life tasks to increase their motivation in learning. Next one is fairness and equity. What does this mean? We have to make sure that fairness and equity, we have to make sure that we have clear criteria when we are working on an assessment. We have to avoid any bias, and of course, we have to consider all the individual differences and learning preferences. For example, in using a clear criteria in an assessment, make sure that the assessment is relevant to the cultural backgrounds of all your students. As for the bias, you need to avoid any bias in your exams or in your assessments by avoiding the use of language or imagery that may be offensive for some of your students. Considering the individual differences, it's very easy for you. You just need to include diverse perspectives and diverse experiences in your assessment items. Yes, of course, individual differences doesn't mean different. It's normal, of course. We need to avoid offensive language, of course. Yes. Okay. The last thing is reliability and validity. When you're working on an exam or preparing an exam, you need to make sure that how could your exam be reliable? It means that you need to make sure that your assessment is consistent in measuring what they are intended to measure. Okay. As for the validity, you need to make sure that your assessments are accurately measuring the intended outcome or the intended skills. The last thing here is the importance of inclusive and accessible assessments. Why are they important? Accessible and inclusive assessments, of course, they are crucial to make sure that all our students have an equal opportunity to demonstrate their learning and to succeed academically. Some of the key reasons or the benefits why accessibility and inclusivity in assessments are important for effective learning is the first one, of course, equity and fairness. If our exams are fair or inclusive assessments, they help to reduce the educational disparities and they promote more equity in our classrooms. Second thing is increased student engagement. Of course, when students feel that assessments are fair and relevant to their learning, they are more likely to be engaged and motivated. This can lead to, of course, improved learning outcomes and overall students' satisfaction. The next thing is the accurate assessment of learning. Inclusive assessments provide a more accurate picture of students' learning. This happens when we eliminate the barriers that may prevent our students from demonstrating their full potential. This also helps us as teachers to identify our students' strengths and weaknesses, and this will give us a bigger picture on how to provide appropriate support. And in this point, I'm talking about giving your students feedback on what they have done in a test or in assessments. I have an idea I once read about. It's called remove the idea of giving feedback. We need to make it a feed forward. Feedback, it means that we're just talking about the mistakes that they have done. This doesn't help them, or this doesn't give them or provide them with some ideas to work on. So let's think of it as giving a feed forward. We need to give them our opinion on what they have done and give them some ways to help them master their subject matter they are learning. We need to care more about what's going to happen next, not what they have done in the past. And the last thing is, of course, these type of assessments will have improved student outcomes. When you provide your students with the opportunity to succeed, or when you give them accessible and equitable assessments, this can lead to improved student outcomes, such as, for example, they will have, of course, higher grades. We will increase the graduation rates, and it would be better, for example, for students to be ready for their careers in the future. So overall, accessibility and inclusivity in assessments practice, they are very, very, very important and essential for promoting equity and fairness in our classrooms. When we eliminate the barriers, as we said, to assessment, and we ensure that all the students have an equal opportunity to demonstrate their learning, we can create a more inclusive and a more equitable educational system in our classrooms. I hope this was helpful for you. I have finished my presentation. If you have any questions, please, you can send them in the chat box, and I'll go to Kath. Kath, you're here?
Yes, I am. Hi. Thank you,
Hi.
Nashwa. That was
Thank you.
fantastic. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for those great ideas. We've had
Thank
loads of people, um, both here in Zoom and on Facebook and YouTube, thanking you for so many great ideas in this session. So thank you.
thank you so
You
much.
can stop sharing your screen now so that we
Sure.
can go to some of the questions and we can see you,
Okay.
if that's okay. All
Okay.
right. So we've got a lot of questions. Obviously, there was loads of great ideas there. Some of the questions we've had, for example, Alice has asked, when you talked about the performance-based assessment, so things like doing presentations or plays or all those kind of really nice creative ideas. And her question is, would you recommend doing those with, or would you be able to do those with a primary class, for example?
Of course, performance-based assessments can work well with both younger learners and with large classes. It's okay. For example, if you're working with primary students, you can have tasks that are simple and fun. For example, short role plays, you can ask them to order food or ask for directions. If you're
Mm,
working with a large class, you can still use these types of assessments. For example, you can organize students into small groups, for example, and rotate between them. Make sure that all of the students get a chance to demonstrate their skills.
mm,
These types of performance-based assessments, exactly, they are inclusive because they focus on real-life use of language, not just the
mm.
tasks.
Yeah, great. One, I think it's Rahina, sorry if I've pronounced that wrong, in the chat,
Okay.
um, made the comment that learners feel more relaxed with peer assessment. Has that been your experience? Do you find that I think some students, I know from my experience, they feel kind of a little bit under pressure if they have the teacher sort of looming over them and they know they're being assessed.
Yes.
Do you find that these kind of more inclusive techniques like peer assessment, do you find that students relax more and therefore perform better?
Yes, of course, because peer assessments are designed to be safe and supportive for the students.
Mm,
Instead of just asking them for open criticism or something like this, students can use structured and checklists, as I said, that are
mhm,
simple, which is a very easy way or a very easy method, such as just ask them to write two positive points and one suggestion for your colleague. For example, a
mhm,
checklist might include items like clear pronunciation, correct
mhm,
use of grammar, using new vocabulary items. This ensures that the feedback is constructive and not personal.
mhm,
This also helps the students that are shy students to feel more
mm.
comfortable when they give or receive the feedback.
Yeah, I mean that was another. I think Dr. Anum Hanif in the chat in the Q&A was also asking. Sometimes it's difficult if students are very shy or lack confidence in English, especially with speaking, to assess them. So I guess this is a way of helping those students as well, kind of perform better or show what they know, isn't it? A couple of people have also asked about writing. So if you're doing assessment with writing, can that also be inclusive?
Of course, any type of assessment can be inclusive. You just
Hmm.
need to follow some steps like we have just discussed. You can always have a checklist to assess your student. Make sure that the criteria you are using is clear. We're not
Hmm.
here to count their mistakes. We're here
Yeah.
to help them avoid these mistakes the next time. Just
Mm.
following a clear criteria, a clear checklist will be very helpful for you.
Mm. I think that's, yeah, I think that's the sort of mindset, isn't it? Sometimes when people
Mm.
sort of think of assessment as testing and,
Yes.
you know, looking for errors, but actually it's also looking for things that can be improved and
Exactly.
praising.
Exactly. We are looking for areas to improve, not for the
Hmm.
areas to be to find their mistakes. We don't need to
Hmm.
focus more on the mistakes. We need to be more focused on how to help them avoid these errors next time. Because as we said, everyone makes mistakes. Even us as
Hmm.
teachers, we make mistakes. It's
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah, of course. Um, Another question that we've had in Facebook is from someone called Ina saying, is it possible if your school is we all work in sort of institutions unless you work for yourself. And a lot of the time schools kind of dictate or tell us what kind of assessment we have to do, or we have to, you know, reach certain objectives. In those cases, which I guess will be the case for a lot of teachers here, how can we make assessment inclusive? Or
Okay.
how can we use some of these techniques?
Yes, I get the point because I have
Mm.
this set assessments in my college where I work, but it's
Mm.
very easy for you. You need just to, even if your school requires a set assessments, we can still integrate inclusive practices, such
Mm.
as some formative assessments. For example, we can
Mm.
use project-based assessments. We can use the portfolios. We can resort to peer assessment, as we said. We can ask them to work on a project. This will help our students to prepare for official tests. It would be very
Yeah.
helpful for them. And these activities, of course, reduces their test anxiety. This also supports diverse learners, and it will provide them with the opportunity that we're talking about to practice and to get their feedback as feed forward, like what I've just said, which will make these assessments faster and more effective for them.
Mm. So it'd be a case of kind of combining the two. You kind of prepare
Exactly.
them. If you have to do a formal assessment, then you can prepare them for it by doing some of these other sort of less stressful activities. Or yeah, I love the feed forward idea as well. That's really
Yes.
like a nice way to think of it. Um, on that note, someone has asked about someone in the chat. This is Amin has said if you're teaching, they teach in a Moroccan public school, they have classes of more than 40 students, they have to teach more than 10 classes. Is it feasible to use these kind of inclusive assessments, would you think, when you've got a heavy load of students and a lot of big classes?
Yes, it's okay. We can use some, for example, student teamwork or collaborative assessments more than
Hmm.
individual, because this
Hmm.
would be easier for us as teachers to maybe to check and to notice their progress. For instead of having singular projects or working on a singular presentation, individual presentations, no, ask them to work on a group presentation and
Mm.
divide the class into groups of, for example, four, not more than four. You can just choose
Hmm.
four, five students maximum, so that each one of them could have a chance and equal chance to demonstrate their learning. And then
Hmm.
instead of having to, for example, checking, this applies, for example, in teaching writing or assessing writing. Instead of having to check 30 different essays, you'll just have
Mm.
five at the end. So
Yeah.
it'd be more easy for us as teachers to check and to give feedback to our students.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, that's great. Um, One question as well that I had was when you're talking about inclusive assessment and you're talking about using like criteria and checklists, do you ever, I mean, some people have a lot of teachers have different ideas about this. Do you give grades? Do you give marks, or do you avoid doing that?
Um, if they have or if they got high grades, I always give them the grade. because it would be more motivating for them for the next time. If their grades are low, I just give them open feedback. You did
Hmm.
good on this, you were good at that, and you had a problem with this, instead of and avoid giving them grades, because this could be demotivating for some students.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Somebody else in the chat was asking a little bit about differentiated
Yes,
tasks.
yes,
So if
yes.
you were going to give a slightly different task to different students based on how prepared you thought they were, some students might resist this because they might think it's unfair. Have you come across that situation, or how would you tackle that in the classroom in your
Okay.
groups?
Yes, first thing, I need to observe them at the beginning of the semester, and I take notes of their learning preferences. I
Mm,
can assess the same, for example, vocabulary item. One of the students, they are very good at memorizing and writing using these vocabulary items. I give them a regular test.
mhm,
Questions with, for example, filling the gaps using these vocabulary items. Another
mhm,
student, they love the idea of working on funny thing, draw something to illustrate
mhm,
this vocabulary item.
mhm,
The idea of asking them to create memes, it was very, very, very funny and very engaging for them. Create a meme that illustrates the meaning of this word. They
mhm,
will never imagine how creative they are. You will always be
mm.
amazed by their
Yeah.
creativity. Yes. So ask them to draw something, ask them to write a song using the vocabulary items, write a short poem using these vocabulary items. So give them multiple ways to assess them, but at the end of the day, you're just still assessing the same vocabulary item, but with
Mhm.
different ways.
And if you're giving learners the choice, are there any resistance to, oh, this
No,
looks more fun, or
this is very nice question. What I
Mhm,
do is prepare. I go prepare with prepared questions or
mm,
different tasks, and then I give them the choice. Would you like to take a test on this, or would you like to be in the group that is going to draw something, or would you like to be in the group that is going to perform in a role play? This will make them choose what they already want. I give
yeah,
them choice, but
okay,
according to what I know they are going to choose. So
right.
at the end of the day, they choose what I want them to do. That's it. So I keep them engaged, and I have everything fulfilled for me.
You're giving them the illusion of choice.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, that's great. I guess as well, students prefer to choose something they know that they can do well, right?
Yes,
So it
exactly.
kind of works for them as well. Yeah, okay. In the chat, we've got another question, a little bit similar to what we were discussing before. Should be saying how do you advise dealing with implementing a more inclusive and relevant assessment program when stakeholders, so your learners or parents or teachers or admin staff or administration, firmly believe that traditional testing is the correct way to measure progress?
Okay, we are going to use in these ways that we talked about to help
Hmm.
the students be more prepared for the assessments that
Mm,
they have to do at the end of the semester. It's okay. At the end of the
mm,
year, they are going to be tested on specific lessons or specific vocabulary items, or,
hmm.
for example, in my college, they need to write an opinion essay at the end of the
Right.
semester for the writing task.
Hmm.
It's okay. I'll use the projects, and I'll use performance-based assessments and everything, portfolio. I will collect their work, and then
Hmm.
at the end of the semester, give them everything with their feedback. This will help them to perform better in the tasks
Hmm.
that they are going to have at the end. So we can
Right.
use this to prepare them for what they are supposed to do.
And do you ever get any kind of negative feedback while you're doing those more inclusive tasks? So are people sort of resistant to it at first, or not? Has that not been the case?
Actually, I have the total opposite way. When
Mm,
students are more engaged and more motivated and more included,
hmm.
this makes them more interested in the subject matter. And what I always have in my classes, they are very keen on getting more tasks. They are very interested in competing, but in their own ways. So
Right.
this is very encouraging for them. It's when
Hmm.
give them the chance to do what they feel more comfortable for them. They
Hmm.
feel the idea of, and they have the feeling of success. And when people feel successful, they want to do more. It's what everyone thinks and believes in.
Yeah, great. Another question was, you talked a lot about portfolios, and a lot of the people in the chat
Yes,
were asking about portfolios.
yes.
Can you just give us an example of what kind of things do you do for the portfolios, and how do the learners react to that?
Yes, yes. As for portfolios, we can just include a mix of students' work. For
Hmm.
example, writing samples, ask them to give you every paragraph they have written, the essays. Uh, for speaking tasks, you can ask the students to use their phones to record something and send it to you.
Hmm.
We can also have weekly reflections about what they had learned throughout the week. Some
Hmm.
students even add their drawings, their vocabulary maps, or even the
Hmm.
memes that I ask them to show their creativity. But most of my students enjoy the process itself because they could see their progress over time and they feel
Hmm.
the sense of ownership over their learning. So it's
Hmm.
very helpful for them and for me as well.
Yeah, very motivating. And you mentioned like paper, but also digital, so it could be sort of
Yes,
mixed
we
paper,
still have,
digital.
yes, soft copies, hard copies, both of them. We still have
Yeah.
a portfolio at the end. It's okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah, great. Okay. Somebody else, Jennifer, I think, was in the chat and Zoom, also asked about, you mentioned podcasts as a form of
Yes.
assessment. Could you just briefly tell us a little bit about how you would go about setting that up, or how that works as an activity?
Okay. For example, if we're having a lesson about discussing global issues that are happening right now, instead of
Hmm.
asking them to answer some fixed questions, just ask them to work together, a host and a guest. The host will prepare some questions, the guest will prepare the answers, and then they will take turns to ask and answer each other questions about these global issues that are happening right now. They can record it, they can film it
Hmm.
as a video, it's okay. And then instead of just asking them to talk and talk and talk, it'd be very boring for them. They would be very interested in the idea of the podcast. Ask them to have to work on background music, ask them
Hmm.
to work on a name for their podcast. You will
Hmm.
be amazed at how creative our students might be.
Hmm.
And it will be very motivating for them and engaging for them. Keeping your
Hmm.
students engaged and motivated is what we want all the time. Keep them motivated,
Yeah,
keep them engaged. We will reach amazing results.
100%. Yeah. So they're doing a whole production. That's great. Yeah.
Someone was asking
Okay.
about
Yeah.
having a dyslexia, students with
Mm.
dyslexia. Uh, we have something that we do at our university for students who have problems with the reading or dyslexia and so on. Instead of giving them a normal A4 paper exam, for example, you can just print it on an A3 paper. It would be
Mm.
very helpful for them. Or you can use assistive technology, text to speech. They can
Hmm.
give them the text and they can listen to it and then again answer by saying their answers, and the same program, for example, will turn their answers into written questions. It's okay. You can use text to speech. You can use bigger paper. You can
Hmm.
ask someone to help them by reading, or you can read for them. It's okay if they have a problem.
Hmm.
What matters is that we need to make sure that they understand how to answer some questions, answer them, but in a way that makes them feel more comfortable. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Nashwa, this has been great. We're very almost
So,
nearly out of time.
thank you.
But you are coming back for a Facebook Live on the
Of course,
26th
yes,
of September. That's at
yes.
1 o'clock UK time. I think we've got a slide, yes, with information for that. So if you have more questions for Nashwa, if there's things that we haven't managed to answer, then please try and join us for that, and she'll be answering more questions then. So we're going to be taking a short break in a minute, but in 15 minutes we have our second session today, which is with Paula Assad, who's talking about creative assessment. So loads more ideas to come. I'm feeling excited about implementing some of these ideas with my students now. So Thanks very much, Nashwa, and
Great.
thank you to everybody, Mel, who's moderating here, and Naomi on Facebook and YouTube, and thanks to everybody who's participated, and of course,
Thank
mostly to Nashwa for those great ideas. Thank you
Thank
so
thank
much.
you so much, Kat. This was amazing. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who participated. You were a great attendees. Thank you so much for the ideas that you gave. Someone was talking about a font called dyslexia font. So if someone interested, you can search for this. Thank you so much. This was amazing to be hosted by you. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you, Kat.